The wind moved like an old ghost across the town of Red Hollow that morning, dragging tumbleweeds down the main street as though searching for something it had lost long ago. The sky was pale gold, dust hung like smoke, and every window in town seemed to watch the same thing. A poor man standing at the auction yard fence with hope and hunger in his eyes. Eli Mercer leaned on the hitching post, his hat pressed against his chest. His coat was sun-bleached and torn at the cuffs, his boots cracked from years of walking where the earth refused to give. Around him, men laughed and haggled, trading money and pride in equal measure. At the far end of the yard stood a massive draft horse, tethered to a post, his ribs faintly showing, beneath a coat that had once been black but now looked the color of old coal. The horse's eyes were dull, heavy, and tired. A few traders jeered, calling him dead weight on four legs. Eli watched quietly, a line of sweat running down his cheek. He didn't see a useless beast, he saw something else, something that felt too familiar. "Maybe he ain't useless," he murmured under his breath, voice low as dust. Harlan Pike, the loudest of the traders, caught his eye and smirked. "You want him, Mercer? He's fit for nothing but a grave. Tell you what, I'll trade him for that sack of corn feed you're dragging." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The thought of swapping food for bones amused them to no end. Eli looked down at the feed, his last sack, meant to keep his chickens alive another week. But hunger wasn't new to him. He looked back at the horse. There was something in its eyes that wouldn't let him walk away. That he nodded once. "Deal." The yard went silent for a heartbeat, then burst with laughter. "That man's gone soft," someone said. "Trading dinner for a ghost horse." Clara Boone watched from the porch of her feed store, arms crossed against her apron. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, her eyes steady and kind. She'd known men like Eli all her life. Good ones, too gentle for this land. When Eli began to lead the horse away, she called out softly, "Give him shade and a kind word, Eli Mercer. Even beasts remember grace." Eli tipped his hat without looking back. "I'll try, Miss Boone." They walked out of town together, man and horse, both too quiet for the noise of men who never learned mercy. The heat shimmered on the road, turning them into mirages, two lost shapes swallowed by distance. By afternoon, Eli reached what was left of his ranch. The house leaned against the wind, shingles missing, windows fogged with dust. The trough was dry, the grass dead, and the air smelled like old wood and regret. He untied the horse, patted his side, and said, "Guess this is home, partner." "Ain't much, but then again, neither are we." He named him Magnus. The name came from nowhere, maybe from memory, maybe from the sound of thunder that used to roll over the plains before the drought stole its voice. The next few days passed slow as molasses. Eli mended fences, patched the roof, tried to coax Magnus to eat. The horse barely touched his feet. He stood in the shade, head bowed, breath heavy. But Eli talked to him anyway. He spoke about the ranch before the drought, about his wife who died one winter too many ago, about how the world forgets a man when he stops being useful. "You and me," he whispered one night, resting against the horse's side. "We've both been traded cheap." The stars burned bright that night. Cruel in their distance. In town, the story spread faster than wind through wheat. Folks laughed over their whiskey, shaking heads at the fool rancher feeding a dying horse. "Mercer's lost his wits," they'd say. "Can't tell the difference between hope and hunger." Sheriff Dunn, a man with more sense than words, rode out one morning to check on him. He found Eli repairing a fence with trembling hands. "Town's talking," he said kindly. "They say you've lost your sense, Eli. Maybe it's time to sell and move on." Eli didn't look up. "Move on to where, Sheriff?" "Dust follows a man just the same as debt." Dunn sighed. "I hate seeing good folk drown in dry land." When he left, Clara Boone came by, bringing a small sack of leftover grain. She found Eli sitting beside the horse, both of them still as stone. She placed the sack down and said gently, "Some things just need time." Eli's voice was hoarse. "And some things just need faith, Miss Boone." Her gaze softened. "Faith don't grow easy here, but sometimes it grows anyway." As she rode away, Magnus raised his head, nostrils flaring, and let out a deep, rolling neigh that echoed across the empty fields. It startled Eli enough to make him smile. "Maybe it does grow here after all," he said. Evenings were quiet after that. Eli brushed Magnus' coat until it shone faintly in the lantern light. He sang old trail songs to the wind, half for himself, half for the horse. In the distance, coyotes called, the only witnesses to their strange companionship. One night, as the horizon turned purple and the air grew cool, Eli sat beside the corral fence. Magnus stood nearby, motionless, watching the same sunset burn out over the land. The colors bled together, amber, red, violet, like old stories retold too often but still beautiful. Eli whispered, "Some say a man's worth is what he owns. But I reckon it's what he refuses to give up on." Magnus shifted his weight, tail flicking at the flies, and for a brief moment, Eli thought he saw a spark in those tired eyes, like an ember refusing to die. The light faded, leaving only the sound of wind through brittle grass, and the shape of two survivors drawn in the dirt by dusk. And though no one in town could see it, something quiet and holy had begun to take root out there, something no drought could touch. That night, thunder rolled across the plains like a warning from heaven. Eli woke to the sound of wind battering the roof, rain pounding against the cracked windows. The drought had broken at last, and the world seemed to be remembering what mercy felt like. Magnus was restless in the corral, his massive body trembling with something wild and ancient. Lightning flashed, glinting in his eyes. Eli ran through the storm, coat plastered to his skin, shouting over the wind, "Easy, boy, easy." But Magnus didn't settle. He stomped the ground hard enough to shake the fence posts, hooves striking deep into the softened earth. Then came a low rumble, something giving way beneath him. The ground tore open near the north field, sending mud and water sliding into a shallow ravine. When the rain stopped near dawn, Eli trudged through the soaked field to mend what he could. The air smelled of wet dust and sagebrush. He crouched to inspect the washout, and there, half buried in the mud, something glittered faintly. Tiny golden flecks, shimmering beneath a layer of clay. He rubbed them between his fingers, heart pounding. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." He dug deeper, finding more of the same glint. Raw, rough, unmistakable. Gold. He looked back toward Magnus, who stood watching quietly, steam rising from his coat in the morning light. "You found it, didn't you?" Eli laughed, a deep, broken laugh that startled the birds from the trees. "You damn miracle of a horse, you found it." For the first time in years, he felt life rush through him. Not greed, but gratitude. Not triumph, but release. The land hadn't betrayed him after all. It had just waited for him to keep believing that by noon. He rode into town with a small pouch of dust. When he walked into Clara Boone's store, mud on his boots and gold in his hand, she looked at him as though she'd seen a ghost. "Eli Mercer," she breathed. "Is that what I think it is?" He poured a few grains onto the counter. "The land finally remembered me." Within an hour, word spread like wildfire. Men who once mocked him now leaned close, their voices trembling with sudden admiration. Harlan Pike's face went pale when he saw the dust. "Where'd you get that, Mercer?" Eli didn't answer the question straight. "Sometimes, you just gotta wait for the rain." The sheriff shook his head in disbelief. "After all this time? Lord, Eli, you struck it rich." Eli smiled faintly. "Rich enough to feed my horse and fix a roof. That's plenty." He spent the afternoon buying lumber, tools, and grain, not for himself, but for rebuilding what the land had given back. Magnus stood outside the store, towering and patient, no longer a joke, but a miracle wrapped in muscle and mud. Clara came out to brush his neck, her hand trembling slightly. "He's beautiful now," she said softly. "He always was," Eli replied. But not everyone could let peace rest. That night, greed came crawling through the dark. Harlan Pike, drunk and desperate, crept onto the ranch with a lantern in one hand and a rope in the other. He whispered curses as he tried to lead Magnus away, hoping to claim the mine as his own. Magnus snorted, jerking the rope free, eyes blazing. The lantern fell, flames licking the wet dirt. The commotion woke Eli, who stormed out with his rifle half raised. "Harlan!" he shouted. The two men struggled under the ghostly light of the moon. Mud, breath, and fury tangled together. When Eli finally had the chance to strike, he stopped himself. Pike lay panting in the dirt, beaten by shame more than fists. Eli lowered his gun. "You don't steal from a man who's already lost everything," he said quietly. "Go home." Pike stared up at him, eyes wide. then stumbled into the night. By morning, he was gone from Red Hollow for good. When the town learned what happened, the laughter stopped for good too. The same men who'd mocked Eli now nodded to him in passing, tipping hats with something close to respect. Gossip faded into silence, and silence turned to gratitude. Weeks passed. The North Field yielded a narrow but steady vein of gold, enough to clear debts, repair fences, and help the town survive the winter. Eli didn't live like a rich man. He still rose before dawn, still fed Magnus first, still thanked the earth every morning. But something in him had changed. He carried himself straighter, spoke softer, smiled easier. Clara began visiting more often, bringing coffee and small jokes that filled the quiet spaces. Sometimes they worked side by side without words, painting the barn, stacking wood, planting the first new patch of oats. Their closeness wasn't sudden. It grew like spring grass, steady and sure. One evening, as the sky burned violet and gold, Clara leaned against the corral fence, watching Magnus pull the plow through the soft, dark soil. His coat gleamed like polished bronze. "He's no longer useless," she said. Eli stood beside her, the wind ruffling his hair. "Neither am I." The field stretched wide before them, furrows shining wet in the dying light. Magnus stopped and turned his head, looking at Eli as if he understood every word. "Funny thing," Eli said softly. "You were never the treasure, were you? You just led me to it." He placed a hand over his chest. "Right here." The horse breathed out slow and deep, and for a moment, even the wind seemed to bow its head. Clara smiled through the shimmer of tears. The world around them felt still, no dust, no drought. Only the hum of a land reborn. Night settled. Eli stood between Magnus and Clara, the light fading from gold to blue. His voice was low, almost a prayer. "Maybe that's what grace looks like, finding worth where the world saw none." He looked toward the horizon, where the stars began to wake, and added, "Sometimes the richest gold ain't buried in the ground, but in quiet faith that something broken can still be beautiful." The camera would linger there, the three of them framed by dusk. The fields alive again, the sound of hooves echoing like a heartbeat through the dark, and just before the screen fades to black, Eli's voice returns, softer now, like a memory whispered through time. "So if the world ever calls you useless, don't listen. Maybe you're just waiting for the right storm."